Hello, hello. How's everybody doing this Wednesday? Thank you so much for taking the time to join our topic today, compliance versus security. This should be very lively and interesting. We are going to wait just a few more seconds. Folks are still popping in, and then we will get started straight away. Again, thank you so much for joining me today. This is going to be quite the lively conversation. Definitely welcome your questions in the Q&A. I'll be monitoring that as we go, and just to kind of break it up, if there's good questions being posted live, I'll happy to pick those up and talk about those in real time. Okay, I think we're going to kick it off. Again, thanks everybody for being here. You know what you signed up for. We're going to be talking about compliance versus security. Are they at odds with each other? I work with a lot of CISOs, talk with a lot of different folks, and obviously just see what's posted in the world and going on. And there's always this kind of undertone that compliance versus security. No, it's security. No, it's compliance. No, it's security. They can't be one and the same. They have to be at odds with each other. And it's so interesting because that is really so far from the truth. So if you're one of those people that thinks compliance is not security, please stay tuned. Please listen and obviously give your feedback as well, because they are intentionally one and the same for sure. And how is that? Well, because this is all about risk mitigation. I say this all the time. Being a cybersecurity professional is identifying and mitigating risk and monitoring that risk posture in the organization. Like, that's our job. That's what we do. If you want to know who some of the best risk practitioners are in the organization, go look at your cyber folks. It's what they do every day. Now, a lot of times they just kind of skip ahead and they know vulnerabilities are bad, for example. So, oh, I need to go buy this tool. They know access control is risky. So, oh, we just need to buy this tool. And so they just kind of skip maybe a formalized risk, but that's precisely what they're doing, is mitigating risk. Well, here's the kicker. Are you ready for this? Compliance is doing the same thing. The intention of compliance is to mitigate risk. It's not to pass audits. It's human nature. It's poor human nature that has distorted this to become about, oh, pass this audit, pass this audit, pass this audit. What do I need to do to check these boxes to pass that audit? That's not what we're doing here at all. And if we're doing that, we've really unfortunately lost sight of the point of what we do as cyber and risk and compliance practitioners, GRC, whatever you want to call us or whatever you want to call yourself. But we've lost sight of it if we don't remember that risk is what we're doing. And there are different activities that we do, obviously, for cyber. Cyber tends to be more on the technical side. And then for compliance, there's a lot of people in process on that side. But again, intentionally, they're all the same to mitigate risk. So it's not this picture at all. That is so wrong. I wish I had one where they were hugging now, but it's really leveraging compliance to help build right security. And then compliance is huge for customer assurance as well, because a lot of customers, including, I'm thinking a very large customer like the United States government, is very interested in how their data is protected. And so compliance is the mechanism really to help build that customer trust and that assurance. And that's why so many customers are asking for it. But never, never, never in their asking is it just to pass an audit. Well, did you pass this audit? Because that's all we care about. No, that's not what they care about. They're just asking that because that's what they can look at to try to give themselves some sort of comfort. But what they're really asking is, are you good at risk identification and risk mitigation? Are you good at making sure my data is going to be secure? Are you good at being a good partner that I'm trusting with my data and my revenue, quite honestly? And how good are you at that? That's what they're asking. They're not saying those words, but that's what they're asking for when they ask for things like audits and security questionnaires and all of that. So again, when it becomes a check the box mentality, it gets wholly disconnected from risk reduction. Just, I cannot drive that point home enough. So this is funny. I had to share this today because I will, by nature of who we are and what we do a lot of cybersecurity. We do a lot of Compliance, because compliance is really, quite frankly, what's beating everybody up right now. Do you have this? Do you have this? Do you have fill this out? That's what the pain that everybody's feeling right now. And unfortunately, it's consuming a lot of resources and companies, and so they're having to spend tremendous time on that. But customer assurance is huge, preserving revenue is huge. So I get asked this question, makes me chuckle. So wait, how is what you do mitigating risk? Like completely confused. I've been asked this numerous times, and it makes me laugh every time I get asked. So it's this notion that compliance has nothing to do with mitigating risk. It's entirely disconnected. Well, let's give an example. Let me give an example, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, but here's a good example. So, security awareness training. We all love it, right? Yay. So, when we have security awareness training within the organization, I see it a lot. We deal with a lot of companies. I've dealt with a lot of companies over the years. So many companies do security awareness training to pass audits. Why do you do it? Pass audits. Why do you do it? Because our auditor's going to need it. That's not why we do it. That is never why we do security awareness training, ever. We do security awareness training because it is a risk mitigating control against the risk of people, humans. And if you look at all the breach reports and stay on top of that, you'll see that a vast majority of breaches in the world ultimately go down to people, a failure of people. And while we can throw all the technical controls that we can at something, and we do, and we're getting better and more technology is coming out, which is great, but there's still this risk of people. And as long as people are involved in the equation, a business, which they are always going to be to some degree, they're always going to be a risk. So then if you take the approach of, okay, people are my greatest risk. So what am I going to do to help mitigate that risk? Well, guess what? Security awareness training is one of those kind of best practice de facto standards of how we work to mitigate the risk of people, because most people don't do bad things on purpose. Most people do bad things out of ignorance, or they just don't know, or haste, or whatever the case may be. And so security awareness is a mechanism to keep it top of mind with people, to help inform them of what they need to know so they can make better choices. Because again, while some people are nefarious, internal threat is definitely a real thing. Most people just are just trying to show up to work and do their job, right? And they're not trying to do bad stuff. So we want to equip them to do that. Now, here's another question for you. So, how often is security awareness training done? Well, to pass my audit, I have to do it how often? One time a year. Great. How many companies do security awareness training? One time a year. A lot. A lot of them do it one time a year. You know why it's called security awareness training? Because it's awareness. It is stuff that most people should know. They've heard it repeatedly. I still do security awareness training. It's to work to keep it top of mind. And some companies are actually having the wherewithal to go to a monthly model or a quarterly model, or maybe they still do their big annual, but they supplement it with other things. And that really is then starting to take a risk based approach to something that feels like, oh, compliance is just telling me to do it, but it's really just a waste of time. It's annoying, and we just try to get through it one time a year. You're missing the whole point, which then goes back to this picture of these two are at odds together, but really they should be hugging, because in this particular case, that they come together to say, hey, compliance is going to require that we do security awareness training. Okay, let's look at our population of people, and let's look at our risk posture of the organization, and let's look at the type of data we have. Let's look at, are we cloud? Are we on-prem? Like, let's look at different metrics. And then, are we remote workers, or do we all come into an office? Like what is the landscape? And then what might be an appropriate security awareness training that I could then layer on top of that to help people really understand how important this is. And so that's absolutely where the two come together. And so every time I get asked that question, which happens shockingly often, well, I don't understand how getting ISO certified mitigates risk. I've literally been asked that. Like, that makes no sense to me. Okay, because ISO is intended to mitigate risk. That's why it exists. It is not intended to find the crappiest auditor and the shortest way you can get stuff done and check a bunch of boxes and then, woohoo, here's my ISO cert. That is not the intent of it. But if you do it that way, that's dangerous, because that really creates a false sense of security in the organization and misses the whole point, the intent, intentionally what ISO is intended to do. So, apologies, still coughing a little bit. So, cybersecurity is risk management. That is precisely what it is. Compliance intentionally is to mitigate risk. Compliance frameworks are typically a set of requirements and or controls that are expected to be implemented within an organization to protect the company data, etc. So intentionally, it's exactly the same as what cybersecurity is trying to do because they're trying to mitigate risk, but coming at it from more so technical controls, technical implementations, which that's very much a part of this equation. But the point is, these two are not at odds with each other. They need to be working together because there's a tremendous amount of overlap. And then never forget that really our intention here is to protect people, protect data, protect the organization, and really come together with this very risk mindset to protect all of that. Compliance is being birthed so much because the world is changing so quickly, especially with threats. And so everybody's just quite frankly trying to keep up. And when you talk to cyber folks, more technical people, they're typically focused on the network or they're focused on vulnerability management. They're focused on patching, whatever they're focused on, which is great. You need that expertise. But somebody needs to be focused, and this would typically fall into the office of the CISO. Somebody needs to be focused on what is our overall cybersecurity plan? What's our strategy? How does that work to support the business? And then out of that, based on our customer base, maybe growth expectations, maybe industries we serve, what are our compliance objectives? And so then we need to make sure we cover those as well because that's very important. If it's regulatory, that's kind of you have to do that. So definitely want to pull that in if it's like a HIPAA or something like that. But if it's our customers are asking us for ISO or customers are asking us for SOC 2, then we want to make sure and pull that in as part of a greater plan. Again, the compliance is not the objective. Protecting the business and the data and people is always, always the objective. Compliance is just a mechanism to help support building that end-to-end cyber plan, and then it works to give tremendous assurance and trust to customers, which is super important because it's tied directly to revenue. And so we certainly don't want to skip that step. So many of the regulatory and many of the compliance frameworks, even though you don't necessarily see it, what they are is nothing more than somebody, a person, a body, a governing body, somebody decided, hey, these are the most critical risks for us using a supplier. So we need to have these things in place. And then out pops the requirements. So again, it's the same process. It's kind of like a in the background risk assessment that somebody did based on if I'm giving you my data, I'm most concerned about X, Y, and Z risks. So, okay, so I want you to have A, B, and C to help mitigate that. So then I'm just going to tell you I need A, B, C. And that's the idea because I want my data and my working with you to be secure and to be protected. And so that's really how it comes to get, that's how it happens. And so the point is, again, compliance is risk minded, cybersecurity is risk minded, same vision, same goal. It's just different perspectives of how we're getting there and different objectives. Cyber with the tools and all the technical controls obviously is very technical, looking to protect the organization even beyond what people may or may not be able to do. Like access, for example, limiting the access a person has within the organization. That's a technical constraint so that they can't do as much harm as they maybe could if they had elevated access. But again, a person has to monitor that, has to set that up appropriately. And so that's exactly what where the failures happen, to be quite honest. And so that's where it's really super important. Okay, I have a question. We had a risk register with 200 items. Love it. Leadership said it was too much, so now they want top 10. How do you prioritize without oversimplifying? Oh, so great. Great question. Thank you, whoever asked that. So yes, 200 items is too much. It's too much for a human being to process. It's a lot. Now, if you're the risk practitioner, you should capture the 200 if you have good, solid process of how to handle those 200. But I say this all the time to companies. If you can't do 10 things well, you can't do 200 things well. So get good at 10 things first, and then you can expand. So if you have a really solid risk management end-to-end life cycle, all the way from identification to assessment and scoring to remediation to follow through to monitoring the risk posture on a daily, weekly, quarterly, month, whatever basis, then you can handle 200, and that's fine. But the practitioners should absolutely keep eye on the 200, but the 200 should never be served up to leadership. It's too much. They can't digest it. So when we work with clients, we absolutely help them with what are the 1, the 2, the 3, the 5 items that you want the top of the house, the executives, to take action on. What do you most need them to know from a risk standpoint, and what do you most need to equip them with to take action? This is an iterative process. It goes on and on and on. Every month, every quarter, we should be serving up what the risk posture is to the executives. And so this is a part of it. And so the CISO, whoever's responsible for risk, the risk officer in the organization, they should not be overwhelming with a bunch of noise, because everybody has decision fatigue, like make all these decisions on any given day, especially executives, and it's too much just from a human level. And then there's just this whole thing of digesting. I can't action 200 things, but I can action one really important thing, or 3 or 5, but really no more than 5, honestly. And then this is where heat maps are great too, because you can take all 200 and you put them in a heat map, and so it becomes very digestible for people. And then they see the 1 or the 2 in the big kind of black red square, and uh-oh, what's that one? Well, glad you asked. Let me tell you what that one is. And here's our assessment, and here's what we recommend, or here's what we're doing, or here's where maybe we need your help. We have blockers. Or maybe the organization has made this decision, like, oh, we've decided we will accept the risk. Okay, well, we're all going to look at it every month, every quarter. We're not going to forget that we accepted that risk, and we're going to revisit it on a regular basis, because we're running this business in good stewardship by managing our risk posture. Then we're making appropriate cyber choices to help to reinforce or reduce that risk exposure, and we're making good compliant. We're leveraging compliance in a right way, in a way full of integrity that our customers would absolutely expect. We're leveraging that to bring the risk down of the organization as well. That is a great, great question. Thank you. I had a CISO ask me once, this is, I hate telling, I love telling the story, but I don't like this, that I got asked this. I got asked this actually repeatedly by a CISO, a very large publicly traded organization. What percentage of people need to have their security awareness training done? I said, 100. No, that's not realistic. It is realistic, because if you communicate it appropriately, you hold people accountable, and you have good escalation in place, it is possible. So then 3 weeks later, what percentage should we need to get to? 100. No, that's not realistic. That doesn't happen. It does happen. I come out of banking. It does happen. Trust me. If the CEO calls you on Christmas Day and tells you you're fired if it's not done within 4 hours, you will get your training done. Now, that's a very harsh way to do it. I'm not recommending that. But what I'm saying is it can be done. And that, again, is what our customers expect. And so this same CISO thought that burning down of vulnerabilities was okay as well. And that's not okay either. Like, burn down is good, but go tell your customers that you've burned down from 10 million to 9 million. It's not gonna be a great conversation, honestly. You want to have, in that case, really solid vulnerability management end-to-end life cycle processes. Yes, burn down is a part of that. You can't fix the whole world in a day, totally get it. But you can have really clean SLAs on the critical vulns, and you can slice it in such a way that you really monitor and stay on top of that, so that you can, with integrity, provide that assurance to your customers. So why does this matter? Well, it matters because companies, data, and people need to be protected. So what we're really trying to do is that. I talked a little bit about customer assurance and customer trust. It matters for that. No customer is going to be okay with, we passed our audit, but really it was just checkbox. We don't really do most of that stuff, or we just do it just to pass the audit. Why don't you tell a customer that? That's not going to go over very well. They're asking for things like audits with the assumption that the underlying work was done it, with integrity, thoroughness, proper skill set, all of the above. So it's great to pass it on. It does look good on paper, and it's great collateral for a company. It's quite frankly a marketing instrument for an organization to say our security has been validated. But when it's misrepresented, that's not really integrity. When you know that you went and found the worst possible audit firm and something that felt really easy, and common sense should probably tell you it probably isn't that easy, or you downloaded a bunch of documents and filled them out real quick, and then, oh, yay, again, went and found a not so great auditor, which is not pretty easy to find, unfortunately, and pretty much in a lot of the frameworks, sadly. And so, that's not really doing it with integrity. It looks good on paper. You buy tools, that's great, but that's not the full equation. There's more to it than just that. And then, yeah, we got our training complete, but are people more aware? Is it more than just once a year? Is it kept top of mind? Are people held accountable? All of the above. And, even the whole security awareness training once a year is rather laughable, because does the world stay the same for a year? Not these days. It changes weekly, monthly, like crazy. And so again, another reason to like really help people understand. We do like monthly touch points for security awareness training at Hotman Group. Even though this is our space, we still do that. And it's like when the AI and the deep fake stuff starts coming on, like people don't know about that unless they just know. And so it's a great way to kind of help them to understand what's going on in the world and what is really possible today, that remotely you can basically mimic a whole person. There's been actually incidents where somebody has misrepresented who they are, get hired into the organization, and then they're really a bad actor. They aren't even that a person that you thought you hired, and then now they have direct access. Now it's an outsider threat, but it's an insider outsider threat, if that's even a thing, because now they're in the organization and can really start to do things. So it's very important that people understand the landscape, and especially with AI, it is just going so fast. So regulatory and frameworks always seem to kind of be behind, regulatory especially, like HIPAA. Look at the HIPAA regulation. It's so broad. If someone says, oh, we're HIPAA, we follow HIPAA, what does that really mean? If you read the guidance, it's not very specific. They're trying to fix that, but it's not like official yet. And so again, it's real easy to play compliance theater, and a lot of companies are playing compliance theater, and it is dangerous. It's dangerous. I have literally been told by executives, we passed our audit. So why are you telling me something different? That makes no sense. Yeah, because we did a huge disservice to the organization when we ramrodded an audit checking boxes, and now the executives don't understand that they really have huge risks, even though they have this audit seal. Now, audits are required to get customer trust. So I understand. I get it. Like, get your audit, get your certification, get your attestation, but don't stop there. That's the whole point. That's not the bar. That's the whole point of this. So what is real is that we should be building a cyber program that does appropriate risk identification. This is where you do risk assessments, not risk assessments to pass audits, has nothing to do with that. It's risk assessments to identify the risk that is real within the organization. What is it that people are afraid of? What keeps them up at night? That's why you need to be talking to your business body of folks, not just your tech and IT people, but across the organization. Like, what is it that keeps you up at night? What are you concerned about? Use that to help pull that into your risk identification processes. Then from there, you build your compliance program. Compliance programs can be birthed from frameworks and regulatory. Most companies at least have one. So start with that one. And then you layer that to your risks. But then you want to continue on. What is the full body of my risk assessment? What additional controls do I need? Then once I've built an appropriate right-sized program for my organization, again, we're not looking for 10 billion controls, because that's going to be really hard to sustain. But what are those right risk mitigating activities? Those are your controls that need to be implemented into the organization. So then you implement them, you make sure you have a good process, roles and responsibility, make sure people know that they're responsible for this thing, that they fully understand what it is, and then monitor them. Trust not the people, but the activities. Trust but verify. Like you can tell people all day long, but then you need to be monitoring it. That's another big problem with audits, to be quite honest, is executives a lot of times don't understand and business leaders, audits are a point in time. They come in at one point, even if it's over a period of a year, for example, they're still doing sampling. Sampling is a very tiny subset. If you have 10,000 change controls, they'll sample 25 of those. Okay, that doesn't mean your change management program and process is really solid. Just because you passed your audit doesn't mean that at all. It doesn't mean that it's appropriately designed for your business. This is just like a permeating thought through so many organizations that really needs to change. So who's responsible to make sure that our controls are operating appropriately? The organization, not the auditors. Auditors don't do that. They come in one time a year and validate the work that you should already be doing. That's the whole point. And so it's very important that we build programs so that we monitor, and when controls fail, and they will, then we capture that. We know that. We're not waiting for an auditor to tell us that. And then we work to mitigate that. I come out of banking, and in banking, there's this concept of three lines of defense. And I really like the concept. And obviously, banking has a lot of layers, a lot of resources, different conversation. But the concept is sound. Basically, it's that there's control owners that own the activities. And so that should be assigned to people, Billy, Bobby, Susie, whoever's responsible for that. Then that's the first line. The second line is the oversight layer. So the second line works in partnership with the first line. They're not independent. They work in partnership. They help them with process design. They help them with control design. When things fail, they help them with remediation, but they're also the oversight and the monitoring. A lot of times they build the metrics and the dashboard. So we can very clearly show this is where our program is. This is where we failed. This is how we're aligned to ISO. This is how we're aligned to SOC 2. This is how our risk posture is, all of the above. And that's the function of the second line. Then the third line is internal audit. Again, not every company, I mean, this is banking, so it's the, top of the food chain as far as like structure and regulatory. But then the third line is internal audit. And so they are to maintain independence from the first and second lines, which means they're not helping to solution processes. They should not be. I've seen ones that think it's fun to come in and help, and that's not their role. They're not responsible for the control operation because they lose their independence. So they're functioning more like a second line, which is fine if that's, the intent of the organization. But the third line is really there to be that independent, objective, come in like an external auditor, sample, spot check, point in times to be that other layer. And I love that it's called three lines of defense. Defense. So internal audit is an element of defense because it's working to protect the organization. Again, if done well and done with integrity and with the intent that it was supposed to be set up with. And then the idea in this is you've got your control owners have been properly trained. There's good SOPs or procedures in place. There's full end-to-end life cycle management of the processes. They know that it's well documented. They're performing those activities. Then the second line is monitoring. And when things fail, and they do, they're capturing that and they're working with the control owner to get that back to a right state. And then internal audit swoops in maybe once a year, maybe quarterly, whatever their audit plan is, and then kind of does an additional verification. So the idea is that when external audit comes in, everybody already is doing this thing. Like the external auditors are just validating what's already in place. Like this is not a surprise to anyone, nor is it one time a year we're going to dust this thing off and hope we pass. That's not the proper way to run a business either. And so that's what is the operational reality of this. And then tools. I'm going to talk about tools here in a little bit, but tools are really, I I'm a tech nerd. I'm a nerd in general. I love this stuff, compliance, risk, all of this, cybersecurity, but I am definitely a tech nerd and love the cool tools and the technology that's coming out. It's really amazing. And tools are a very real part of this. Manual controls are prone to failures. So if we can automate, we should automate. However, we need to automate the right things and then we need to monitor the automation. Very super important. That's called governance. And you're hearing a lot of hubbub about AI governance. Well, guess what? Governance is not new with AI, not a new concept. It's been around. It's basically monitoring what we entrust anybody to do, person, tool, AI, agent, whatever it is, third party vendor. We have these governance processes in place so that we know what they're doing and that's been clearly communicated to them. Policies is an excellent way to communicate that, which is why policies matter. And then we have our program and we're monitoring, and then we're able to hold accountable for everybody what they need to be doing in their roles and responsibilities and their activities. And so super, super important. And a control that often gets overlooked for companies regarding tools, actually two that come to mind, are one, offboarding processes or office are a lot of times non-existent in an organization. Like they have really good onboarding processes. And why is that? Because they're going to be audited on that. So here we go. There's where it's just the wrong mindset. They're going to be audited on onboarding. And can I tell you, auditors don't really hit the offboarding button, which is terrible because that's the full end-to-end life cycle management. So I have literally stepped into numerous companies. They have all, and my CISOs who are listening, they know this. They have all sorts of tools within the organization. And some of them are being used, some of them are not being used. I've even seen cases where the contract has expired and yet there's no contract in place. I've seen cases where, oh yeah, we stopped using that vendor a year ago, but we forgot to turn off the FTP automation, so we're still sending that company data, all sorts of stuff. Why? Because the offboarding process is non-existent or it's very loose and ad hoc, and that's a fail for a lot of companies because again it's not included in the audit. But that's not because compliance is a problem. That's because companies are not building their programs around risk, because the risk of having a vendor terminated, do they have my data? Where's my data going? Am I still sending them data? Like those are very real things. Is the what do I need to do contractually from a legal standpoint? What do I need to do with my customers? Like there's so many activities for offboarding. So that's a really big miss for companies just kind of in general. Another one is the configuration and the monitoring of the tools. So, oops, sorry about that. Many companies buy tools. They're good at buying tools. We see it all the time, and they maybe use it for one use case, but they don't really fully explore the tool. We see this definitely in the GRC tool space. Companies have 2 and 3 and 4 GRC tools. And they just really never get it fully off the ground, which is very unfortunate. See it all the time. But then they also buy other tools. They buy tools for a specific use case, a simple use case. They get that implemented, and then everybody is over allocated in their jobs and they're off to the next thing. And then nobody's really looked at the configuration of that tool for a while. That tool maybe has new features, maybe has new security feature enhancements, and it has to be again part of that end-to-end lifecycle management of how you're inviting that tool into the environment to get to one, to keep it secure, and two, to make sure you get the max out of it. And so there are breaches for misconfigured tools. Like it definitely happens. And I don't hear this as much anymore, but I used to hear this all the time. Well, we use X vendor, fill in the blank here. So we don't have to worry about that. We're secure. And I would hear like, we use AWS, so we're fine. We don't recognize secure. I'm like, you do understand that's a platform, right? It's infrastructure. You do understand you're responsible to configure from a security standpoint. Now, in the case of AWS, they give you tons of tools to help do that. But it happens all the time. Those tools get misconfigured, or this configuration would be too hard. Right now, we need to get it deployed, so we're just going to do it this way. We'll come back. We never come back. We don't really look at that's part of lifecycle management of patching as well, even though you wouldn't patch a SaaS tool per se, but same concept, because you would look at what the vendor is deploying. You would be on the communication. Somebody would be responsible. There would be an application owner for that, and they would be monitoring that. And then as things need to be reconfigured and enhanced and updated, then they would go for that. And then quite frankly, it's moving so fast. Like there's 500 GRC tools. And while changing tools is painful, you got to stay on top of what's out there in the world because you get into legacy infrastructure really quickly these days, like really super fast, quicker than ever these days, just because the tech stack is changing and you guys certainly don't want to start acquiring tech debt. So that's again something to really stay on top of it. So even beyond our companies and our jobs and our commitment to securing this, this matters even beyond that. And it matters because the companies have our data individually. Sherry Hotman, your name, your sibling, your mom, your grandmother, your children, if you have children, like all of the above. Like it's almost a joke. And it's easy for us to get really complacent about the fact that, oh, well, they just have all of, ha ha ha, another breach. Oh well, I'm sure my data is already out there. The reality is it is. It's bad. It's a chronic condition. I think if we all sat and really thought about it, we would just cry. So we just don't think about it. And then that starts to breed complacency. So that's really one side of it. And so that's why, as practitioners in the space, we have a huge responsibility to operate in good stewardship and integrity because the whole world is depending upon this. And it's legit. Like this is not a joke. And again, have worked with a lot of companies over the years and they're just not as great cybersecurity wise as you might think, unfortunately. And it's hard. It's a lot, and it's changing. I mean, let's be real. This is a big deal. This is a big space, and you can talk about if there's resource shortages in the marketplace, all of these other things. But the other part of this is that we saw, I think it was October 2024, maybe a yearish ago, somewhere in there. There was an outage with a particular company and their upgrades and took out hospitals, took out airlines. That's no bueno. None of us like that. We need those companies. A lot of these companies provide very real services that we need, either B2B or B2C, both, that trickle down to help make it better for all of us. And so a company taking a checkbox approach to cybersecurity not only exposes us individually, but also compromises our society because, as we saw, a very solid vendor one little uh-oh, and you take down a hospital. Well, okay, that's now tied to people's lives. So cybersecurity is absolutely about protecting people, protecting data, and protecting the company itself. So integrity, I've brought this up a couple times, and I'm just going to really drive this point home. I am also a CPA. Integrity is huge to me as a human being, but just also in my professional career, integrity has always been just kind of a staple. I was taught it early on in my education, and then obviously I take ethics training every 2 years with to satisfy the state of Texas for my CPE because again they want it just always kept top of mind because we're expected to operate in integrity. And in cybersecurity, it's just a non-negotiable. If we're doing activities to pass audit and we call ourselves cyber practitioners, don't do compliance in a way that really does work to affect the risk of the organization and always come at it from that way. Now, iteration one of the thing might be we just got to pass the audit. That's okay. Just don't stop there. Just don't make that the bar. Like we all, life is iterative. Again, if you can't do 10 things well, don't do 1,000 things. That's ridiculous. So it's the same thing. Just do it. Just start the process and get it done. But be very transparent in, okay, our risk of people, I'll go back to my security awareness training example. Our risk of people is critical. Our inherent risk is critical because people like to click things and people are emotional and they're responsive and they're busy and all those things. So it's critical. Well, our residual risk is critical as well because what have we done to bring that down? Oh, wait a minute. We implemented security awareness training. Great. So what's our risk now? Oh, it's medium low because we make sure everybody takes their training once a year. I would disagree. Your risk is not medium low. You'll pass an audit. Has nothing to do with your risk. Your risk is still maybe high, maybe high critical. It's just barely come down a little bit because a one time a year security awareness training to pass the audit, that's not really a risk focus. So redesign the control to where you can bring that risk down to comfortably to high, comfortably to medium or moderate or whatever your risk scale is. And so that's operating in integrity. Again, don't hear me say don't get your compliance objectives because oh my gosh, we got to do things 100% correctly. I hear that from security folks as well. They like to there are some that like to skip the obvious stuff and just go right to, well, we need to do it to the nth degree, so it's going to take us 3 years. Okay, well, that doesn't work either because for 3 years I still have a risk exposure. So I will take a critical to a high from a critical. I'll take that. That's fine. And if that passes my audit, yay, that's wonderful. We went from critical to high. Great. But let's be real with ourselves. Let's not go from critical to medium low because, oh, we're doing the thing that we need to pass audit. That's not a risk mindset. That's a passing audit mindset. And so really important to think that, but don't get so stuck in, oh my gosh, one time a year security awareness training is worthless. So we're just not going to do it. We're just going to spend 2 years and we're going to design this amazing security awareness training where all this content. Don't do that either, because now you've just left that risk hole for this time. So it's this constant process of mitigating risk in a very iterative fashion. The world is constrained. Companies have limited people and resources. They have limited funding and budgets. Time is limited. Some things have to happen quicker. And so, in all of those constraints, you just have to do the best you can do. Is reality, and preserving revenue is super important within an organization, because without revenue, we don't really have an organization. And so, if our customers need SOC 2s and ISOs, then we go get those. But we don't miss the fact that we're doing risk assessments and we are still focused on building a program and reducing our risk. And we're being very real about that. And we're also being transparent. There's a lot of coaching that security folks need to do for the executive layer, but it's not let those audits create the false sense of security. So if you've done proper risk assessment and your language with the executives is risk and instead of audits, it helps them to understand what the difference is. And then, oh, by the way, we are healthy with our audits. So that's great for revenue. But let me get back to the risk conversation, because don't forget that the audit is there as a point in time. It's not the day-to-day operation of running a cyber program. And it is there to help build customer assurance. And the customers just need to know that they can use you as a vendor, and you're going to protect them. So integrity is huge. There's some other aspects to this. We talked about tools, but there's also people and process. So technology is huge, especially in the cyberspace. It's a highly technical field, and a lot of different moving parts. And so it's real easy for companies to jump to the technology, especially with a bunch of very smart, tech-minded tech folks, security folks. Huge part of this puzzle, because the more doors we can close with technical controls and constraints that we can put into place, the better, because it protects people from people. And that's a great idea. However, it really does not stop there. There's people and process. There's end-to-end lifecycle management. People need to run these processes. People configure tools. People monitor tools. People run controls, because not everything can be automated. Yes, I said that. Not everything can be automated. So if a GRC tells you everything can be automated, press this button, you're good to go. Seriously, common sense. That's just not the reality. There's much more aspects to this. If it were that easy, then everybody would have done it. And why do we have a cyber shortage, talent shortage? I mean, come on, it's not that straightforward. That is a piece of it, and it's an important piece of it. But if you don't, I see it all the time. Companies will buy 1, 2, 3 vol scanning tools in the organization. But then we start to really talk about what is their full life cycle of those vulnerabilities. And that's where it goes sideways. And then who's responsible for this? And what's your SLAs? And how are you categorizing them? And then when there's one you're not going to fix, what are you doing with that? Like there's where the process comes in because again, we do vol scanning to mitigate risk because vulnerabilities are open doors for bad actors. And so that's why we do vulnerability management. But if we do not have a full end-to-end process, the tool itself is not good enough because people have to evaluate what it finds. Sadly, a lot of those tools still have a lot of false positive, a lot of noise, and so they have to monitor it. A lot of people, use kind of the standard ways to risk score them, but everybody knows that system is very flawed. And so what is really the risk assessment process for the organization? And then I might not be able to fix all the vulnerabilities, kind of back to the CISO conversation I mentioned earlier. If there's a lot, like I really can't just fix that overnight is the reality. But I do need to have a very intentional plan about how I risk assess them, how I prioritize them, and then what are my SLAs. And if I'm trying to get caught up, then I need a very specific plan to get caught up. So I'm mitigating the risk for the organization and then really monitor those SLAs in place. So the point is, it's all three. And when we work with companies, hands down, because we work with a lot of very smart cybersecurity folks, tech folks, CISOs, all of the above. Hands down, the technology is pretty decent. Like obviously there's configuration opportunities, there's holes here and there, but technology is there. They know their stuff. They're doing their job for the most part. But hands down, where they fail is people and process. So much of the time we are helping companies with what is your process? What are people doing? How are you monitoring that? How does that align with the technology? Is this the right technology? Are these the right controls? All of that, and that really is the full body of that works to mitigate risk. So tools super important, but again, I just talked about that. It's without a plan, it's just going to sit there. A lot of companies buy them because they're cool. They maybe get one use cases off of them, and there are breaches because of tool misconfiguration. The other piece of it is a lot of the tools are third-party applications, so cloud or SaaS. And so there's shared responsibility with the vendor. And I'm going to do a whole topic on this subject, but the vendors need to be really transparent about where their responsibility ends and where the customers begin, and just kind of across the board, that's not real good these days. And so it's hard for the user of a tool to always know exactly what am I supposed to do? Like, what is my responsibility keeping this thing secure? SaaS is a little bit less still there. I mean, it's like MFA, for example. You typically have the option to turn it on or not turn it on. Are you going to do that? I don't know. Somebody has to make a choice, right? What's in the tool? What's the data? Is it worth the hassle of MFA? Like, is that what we're going to do? Or are we only going to turn it on some roles? Like a SaaS would not do that. They would expect you to do that. They would give you the mechanisms to do that, but they would expect you to have that align to your policies and for you to make those configurations. And then when you get down into the platforms as a service and the infrastructure as a service, it gets way more serious because if I'm responsible for vulnerability management, but do I have the capability? We just found this with a company, as a matter of fact, but with a vendor of one of our clients. Do I even have the capability to do that thing that you think I'm going to do? And have you transparently told me that I'm responsible for this piece? Like, oh crap, I'm just now finding this out. Like, this is not good. And so there needs to be real clear transparency between companies and their suppliers. That way they can know. And so that's just kind of a thing with the tools. Like tools are great, but they are not easy buttons. I keep my easy button here just for this reason. That was easy. I don't know if you heard that, but it's definitely a part of the equation, but just equally as a part of the equation. And yes, equally as a part of the equation is people and process. People, process, technology. It's all three. And so you have to design full end-to-end lifecycle processes that involve people, just like the vulnerability management example that I gave earlier. It's easy to go buy a Vol tool. It's easy to buy a Vol scan. What are you going to do with it? And we see it all the time, unfortunately, all the time. And so that's really, really super important. And then, like in the case of vulnerabilities, it's very easy for that to be like a lot of noise because, especially high availability environments, dynamic environments, cloud-based. There's so much like replication. And so a lot of times we see vol scans that are, it's like everything is duplicated. Like, oh, you have this thing 10,000 times. Well, it may not be 10,000, maybe one thing that if I fix over here, it clears up 10,000 things. But then those companies have a hard time with the metrics. They have a hard time like reporting. Do we have one thing or we have 10,000 things? Like, which is it? And then that becomes noise to executives. They don't know how to action on that. The company is overwhelmed because I don't know how to fix 10,000 things, or in some cases it's millions of things. So where do we even start? And so that's again where the people in the process is like super, super important. Okay. Thank you. You guys are listening very well. I appreciate that. Don't really see any more questions, but let me just pop in here and oh, I do see questions. Okay, hold on. Let's see. Um, What do you do when the board asks for simple red, yellow, green risk score, but you know the reality of an organization is more nuanced and messy? Great question. I think you give them the red, yellow, green, but you have to have key talking points. But again, detailed people love to give detailed answers, and this is where we learn to speak executive speak. You have to definitely speak in their language. That's one thing that's, kind of fun about Chat GPT is you can tell it, hey, I'm talking to an executive about risk from cybersecurity. What should I be thinking? If you don't know already, you can leverage something like that just to help teach you, like, this is a better way to have this conversation. But you absolutely give them a heat map, absolutely give them the red, yellow, green, no problem. But anytime it's red or even yellow, why is it red or yellow? Like, now I have to have a conversation with you and I need 1 or 3 or 5 points. Like, I'm not gonna overwhelm you, but this is what it is. And then if there's a blocker, like, hey, we're trying to get budget for this thing and we haven't been able to get budget, and that's the blocker, then that's our opportunity to go, oh, and by the way, this is blocked because of this. Oh, I did not know that. So I need you to take action because this thing is blocked. And so the red, yellow, green is really just a talking point, but then very much the next step would be is that you give them their talking point. Let's see. Have you seen companies actually lose customers because of compliance security misalignment? What were the warning signs before that happened? Yes, absolutely. It is having compliance is a competitive advantage or disadvantage in the world today. Unfortunately, what I see is a lot of compliance theater in the world, security theater, where they're passing audits and getting the business and then moving on. Now, there have been cases where companies, salespeople, unfortunately, are notorious for, oh, yeah, we have that. Yeah, we have that. We have that. I feel like it's getting better today because everybody's much more aware of this stuff. But it even happened in the last year where somebody said, oh, yeah, our sales people agreed to, I don't remember what it was, text ramp, I think, or state ramp. And we haven't even thought about that. But yet they signed a deal that says we have that. And so, oh my gosh, now we have this much time. So, yeah, there's direct revenue tied to that. CMMC, this is becoming a big thing with CMMC. When they start requiring CMMC certification at level 2, there's going to absolutely be revenue tied to that. If 5 people bid on it with the government and 4 don't have the certification and 1 does, there's your competitive advantage. And then what we're also seeing is a lot of like manufacturers that haven't even thought about cybersecurity and now they're being required to have CMMC level 2. What? And so they're like, okay, I don't even know where to start with this. And so, but they have to make a very real decision. Like, are you going to invest in this thing, which is going to cost some significant change? And is the revenue really worth it? Or are you going to walk away from the business? It may be a long-standing um, relationship, but then you don't get your CMMC cert, and so they decide to go with your competitor. Like, that's legit. That's happening right now today. Really great questions. Thank you. So as we really start to wrap this up, then I'll answer a few more questions here I know with our remaining time. We have to reset the bar. It's not passing audits. And if you're in an organization where this is the mindset, we have to just fight the good fight and help people understand. And so, yes, we pass an audit. Yay, we should celebrate that. That's great. But unfortunately, passing audits builds complacency. So we need to be very mindful of that, and especially with executives, because they just don't know what they don't know in a lot of cases. Some of it's by their own choosing, but some of it is they just truly don't know. So a lot of what we do is coaching and transparency within the organization. And so when we pass audits, it can hide real problems. A lot of the audits are scoped. So CMMC, for example, is only CUI. SOC 2 is only what's in your system description. PCI is only the cardholder data environment. And so a lot of these frameworks are scoped. They were never intended to be full end-to-end cyber programs. Goodness gracious. So you passed at SOC 2. Great. It doesn't mean you have a cyber program. Like that should be a subset of it, but it's not the thing. And so we have to help people understand that. And then maybe we're doing a thing in this particular scope, but are we doing a thing over here? Because we just did the thing to pass the audit, but we didn't really roll it out across the organization. I see this a lot in the SaaS companies. We work with a lot of SaaS companies, and they're pretty solid about building stuff in their product offering, or at least to the degree where they can pass their audits. But then when it comes to those same practices implemented on the enterprise or the corporate side of the house, ooh, they're way lagging behind. Why? Because nobody audits them over here. They only audit them over here. So executives are like, hey, yeah, we're secure. We're highly committed to security. But are you? Because have you done a risk assessment for the organization? Have you looked at a maturity for the organization? Compliance is not as much concerned with you having a breach or you going out of business having a resiliency issue. The customer, am concerned about my stuff. That's what I care about, my stuff. And so it's more focused on that. It's not focused on, are you being a good steward from a cybersecurity standpoint of your business? That's just not its intent. So again, if we substitute it and say passing audit makes us secure, we've missed the whole point. Likewise, if we minimize compliance and think it's a stupid waste of time and all it's doing for passing audit, wrong, wrong, wrong. That is not it at all. Intentionally, again, compliance and cyber are doing the exact same thing. It's all about risk reduction. So the idea is to bring them together. They need to be hugging. They need to work together. There's tremendous overlap between them. We need to be doing real risk assessments, real maturity assessments in the organization. A lot of times it is better to do those with a third party, but word of caution, because I saw one just in the last couple of weeks. I see them all the time. I saw a maturity assessment where the organization was scored fours and fives. You know, that creates a false sense of security within the organization if we're not like really harsh and really honest in that scoring. And so a lot of times third parties come in and are just there to just kind of stroke that, oh yeah, everything's going great. Woohoo, yeah, you're doing good. Here's a couple of things you should do a little bit better, but you're good. I don't, if I'm running an organization and I'm responsible for this, I do not want to be told that. I want to be told, pull all the rocks up, dig up all the dirt, look in all the closets, pull all the crap out. I want to know what I need to know now. Like that is what I care about, because if I take this responsibility that seriously, that is what I'm going to do. And then let's not forget, this should be continuously improving. This is not set it and forget it, because everything is just too much in flux. We at Hotman Group definitely will do a complimentary health check of your program. If you reach out to us, happy to schedule that with you. You can see it on the website and reach out. But let's move into some questions. Let's see, I have like 2 minutes. Let's see. What strategies have worked to shift compliance from being seen as check the box exercise to being part of a resilient security culture? Great question. It's a lot of what we've been talking about here, but it's an excellent, excellent question. And the people who are responsible for this thing need to help coach the organization that audit is a point in time tied to revenue and should be an input into a broader security program. But to be clear, when I'm putting together my dashboards and my metrics, and when I'm doing my monitoring and building my program, that's all around risk. And that's the conversation I'm having with the organization so that they can make appropriate and right decisions based on the cyber strategy and based on the strategy of the organization. And oh, by the way, Here's where we are as a compliance. So if we shift the lens that way, it's a people change management issue. It's easy to say it. It's extremely hard to do it. And it takes years to get people to change their thinking. So that's why I say we just keep fighting the good fight. We just keep speaking truth. We keep saying what needs to be said. And we're gonna get there, and we're making the world a better place with each step that we take. Let's see if there's a quick question that I can answer. Um, How does an organization prioritize between meeting regulatory requirements and addressing actual risk exposure? Great question, because we can't do everything all today. There's just not enough money, time, and people in the world to make it happen. So, with your risk assessment based on your true, transparent, inherent and residual risk, you will order things, you will prioritize them by the residual risk, those things that would most impact the organization, and then those would get the higher priority. You would actually make those part of your cyber strategy probably, and then you would have a 6 month, 1 year, 2 year, 5 year plan, whatever that would look like, and then an actual project that you're actually moving through to reduce that risk exposure, because those large risk exposures, they're typically larger projects. Now, if you have one that's a pretty easy fix, just go do it. Just make it happen. And then if you do have a compliance objective that you need to get because it's tied to revenue, well, then those get prioritized as well. And then regulatory, you should always be mindful of regulatory. The thing about regulatory, however, is that it's typically very broad, not DORA from Europe. It's very detailed and nitpicky, but regulatory is typically pretty broad. And so if you just run your program with integrity, a lot of times you are satisfying the bulk of those regulatory requirements. Thank you so much for the questions. We have more sessions coming up, so please sign up for them. The next one is on a very fun topic, third-party risk management or supply chain security. Super critically important because it is a cloud-based world. I appreciate so much of your time and listening. Please connect on LinkedIn. I want to hear from you. Send your questions, send your thoughts and comments. And thank you so very much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.